Okay, so this is going to be a different sort of video to the usual stuff that I do. Not a lot of updates on the troll of late because I've been working designing a different type of paintbrush holder. The sort of holders that you see for free on Thingiverse and Cults and that, they're all pretty much straight up and down. And what I wanted, but couldn't really find what I wanted, was something where you can store your brushes on a 45-degree angle. So anyway, long story short, I've been designing a bit in Blender of the last few days, and I've been printing out a couple of different versions. Don't judge me on this one. This one kind of misprinted a bit. It's droopy in the corner, and it kind of, with the Creality printer I had before this Bambu Labs A1, I quite often, like maybe on 25% or so of prints, had it where it would do what it's done with this one. It would start printing where it's supposed to print, and then something happens in the slicer software and the whole print just shifts a bit, and then it continues printing there. So I had that happen with the steps for my Legolas model. I've had it happen to a lot of prints with the Creality, but anyway, this is the first time it's ever happened to me on the Bambu Labs printer. So what I was actually doing, these were printed with the face to the bottom, so they were printed that way, and it printed like the first half a millimeter to a millimeter of the top surface, and then it shifted a bit and continued to print. I didn't catch it until later. It was already, you know, like maybe a quarter of the way through the print or whatever by the time I got back from work and saw it, and I was like, oh well, I'll just let it continue on. I could have cancelled the print obviously and reprinted it so it all came out perfect, and that would have been fine, but this is as much a prototype test anyway, so I just let it print, and then I've kind of ripped the top off as best I can. Anyway, all of that's got me to this point. None of that has to do with what I'm about to do now. So move on with your life, Jay. I have just bought this scale modeling supply paints, just a white and a black to test, because although yes, I have, you know, all my hobby paints, and it's a great collection with all the colors, but quite often I find that you just want whites or blacks in bulk for a big area first as a color block. So to date I've been using these Monte Marte 75mm tubes, but I thought, well, I'll try something else to give it a go and you know, compare the two. So what I've done with these two that I've printed so far, I've got a third version on the printer as we speak, is I've all primed them in black. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint one with some Monte Marte white, and the other I'm going to test this SMS Scale Modeler Supply white and just see how it compares versus what I've been using in the Monte Marte. So it's a side-by-side comparison, white on a black prime, just to see how well it handles it, and yeah, that's basically what we're going to do. So painting white on black primer is pretty much the ultimate challenge for white, because like it's got to hide completely its background, so it's the hardest color that you could possibly choose to then paint on, and so therefore I've done so for a reason. We'll be able to compare the pair. So first up we have the Monte Marte, the tried and tested, I guess you would say, paint. And to be 100% clear, I never expected this to hide every bit of the black on one coat. Most paints does require 2 coats, so we will just give this 1 coat, let that dry, give it another coat, let that dry, and then compare the results. To make this a quicker sort of video, I'm just going to record the one side, but obviously I'm going to do the whole thing. I kind of reorganized my paints a week or 2 ago, and then was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do with my paint desk and reorganizing some of the other areas on the desk, and that's when I decided, you know what, upright paint holders really don't work for my situation here. What I really wanted something was on an angle, preferably 45 degrees, but any kind of angle. And I went on Culps and the My Mini Factory, as you do, and there was a very extremely limited choice, shall we say. Very limited choice. Alright, so I've run this on the Vortex mixer, so it should be well mixed. Oh, there you go. I was thinking you just poured it straight out of the bottle, but there is... Now, how does that work? Shake well before use. Check. Am I meant to pull that out? Because nothing seems to be coming out without it. I don't know this paint, so I'm not familiar with it, but that does look like an actual cap. So you're meant to pull that out every time you use it? Well, that's not very user friendly, so that can go into the bin. That's something I'm not going to be doing. Right. Not sure how I feel about that. So it's a thinner consistency than the Monte Marte paint. Hello. Can I help you, darling? You just come to check me out. Sorry? Yeah, I'm recording. What? Oh, she ran away. She literally ran. So first disclaimer, I guess, is that this is technically an airbrush paint. That's what they build it for. But full disclaimer still, and disclaimer number 2, I quite often buy airbrush paint and use it with a brush. It's still paint. And it usually just works fine anyway. So not as manufacturer intended, sure. And this is called lacquer, which says in the small print somewhere, acrylic lacquer. I did look online because I'm used to like enamel paint, which you need spirits to clean up, and so I did try and Google search about the cleanup for this, and it did say cleanup was in water. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't sure what lacquer was one way or the other. So that's why I thought I would test it. Because, you know, definitely only buy products that are clean up in water because they're a lot easier to use. But obviously it's quite a bit thinner because it's an airbrush paint, and I get that, which is why I'm kind of having to re-go over it again. But alrighty, initial results for the Monte Marte versus SMS is not a lot of difference, but the one thing that you're going to pick up on in this video is there's definitely a lot more smell, not pleasant smell either, with the SMS paint. But anyway, I'll let that dry, I'll give it its second coat, and we will revisit. So first coats are dry, and the results are pretty clear even just before I put the second coats on. There is one major positive to the SMS product over what I've been using, the Monte Marte, and there are several negatives, some small, some medium sort of negatives. One of the main reasons why I wanted to trial a different product, I don't need it to be an amazing paint. Let's start with that. So this is about doing color blocking. So I've got fantastic AK and Vallejo paints. They're really high quality. This is about getting a color down before I do the detail painting. And with the Monte Marte, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but even just with the one coat here, you can see the lines that have been left, because the Monte Marte paint is what they call a craft paint. Now, is it semantics between a craft paint and a hobby paint? It's debatable, but long story short, it doesn't have as smooth a finish. Now, you could water it down, sure, yes, granted, but the one major advantage of this SMS paint is that it's a very smooth paint. And even when you're actually painting them, and it's just glossy, it goes on so nicely, which is great. Okay, major advantage of that paint over the Monte Marte, sure. But once again, I'm not looking to replace my AK and Vallejo paints, my huge collection of colours. This is for colour blocking, so I have to look at it in that light. There's a few negatives to the SMS, which is probably the reason why I'll stick with the Monte Marte, even though there is some finishing differences which I'm not 100% happy with. One small negative is that this has a smell to it that I don't have with any of my other paints, my acrylic paints. Enamel paints are different, but I don't really use those anymore, which is not terrible, but I don't actually have a great sense of smell myself, and the fact that I'm smelling it means that it does have a smell. So that's one thing. I do think, not 100% sure, but I do think I figured out the nozzle part. I actually drilled in that, and now it comes out in drops. So I put it back in and drilled it. It doesn't say anywhere on the bottle what to do with pouring, but just trying to pour that out without a nozzle or inhibitor, it was kind of went everywhere. So yeah, it's a bit silly that they don't talk about that on the bottle somewhere as to what you're supposed to do with that cap, if you're supposed to use it, if you're not supposed to use it. I get, yes, that this is for an airbrush, but still, even there, you need to pour into the airbrush. So the cap part was a bit silly. So smell and the cap. That's pretty much the two minor negatives to it. The actual paint itself, beautiful, lovely, fine. The major negative for a color blocking paint, this is 30 mil, and at my local Hobby One at Springwood, I can get this for $9.90 or something like that, just under $10. Actually, the price might be on it. No, it's not. I think it was just under $10, $9.90. This Monte Marte is a 75 ml, so like double the amount of paint that comes in it. I get this at Garden City at a kind of craft shop for like $3. So I can get 3 of these, which are double the capacity of this. So yes, it's a smoother paint, but for color blocking, yeah, I'm probably not gonna keep using it, quite frankly. But anyway, that's the explanation as to my assessment of the two. Now, don't get me wrong, if you are looking for an actual paint to paint your models, that's a different sort of criteria than something for just color blocking. I was just looking for a bigger size than my dropper bottles, you know, that I think would work well. So actually it was the side. That's right, it's the side I want to do first. It was the side I showed you. As I said in the first part, doing it on black, it's kind of like on purpose. Like, what's the worst color you can paint your white on is black. So I wanted it to be a hard test, but yeah, if you were doing this without wanting to test the product, you certainly wouldn't prime in black to paint white on top of it. That's just, you know, that's just asking for trouble. I kind of feel like I missed one small negative, but I can't remember what it was. So I know the price is the main negative, and there is a bit of smell. Oh, yes, no, that was the other thing. Okay, I remembered. So it says, well, I don't know if it actually says on the bottle, but when I googled it, and okay, so more fool on me, I was using Google as a reference. Does it talk about cleanup here? Suitable for the environment, shake well before use, safety, do not inhale, don't drink. Okay, it doesn't really talk on the bottle about cleanup. In the Reddit sort of stuff that I read, it said that it is clean up in water, and everything that I use these days is clean up in water. So I was like, great, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a go, which is what I did. But it doesn't really seem to clean up well in water. It does seem to leave some color in the brush. I kind of had to clean it a lot more than I usually do with any of my other paints. And yeah, to be honest, I had my doubts. You know, it uses the word lacquer in its description, which is not a word that most of the paints that I use usually have in them. Okay, so there's a brush on the okay, the usual process for me cleaning is get the dry on a tissue, rinse it in water, dry the paint, the brush again on tissue. And then the brush should look pretty clear, and you can, I think, clearly see, hopefully, that the brush still looks reasonably white, like it still has the tint of the colour of the paint on the brush, even though I've dry brushed it, rinsed it, dry brushed it again, which is what I do for all of my paints. That's my routine for cleaning my brushes. So it doesn't seem to clean out as easily or as quick as my other acrylic paints, not just the Monte Marte, but the Vallejo and the AK. So cleanup doesn't seem to be as good either. So yes, as I say, the price is the main contributing factor, but even looking at some of the other reasons as to why you wouldn't change. Some drops back there. Yeah, I'll be sticking to the Monte Marte, although, you know, you definitely can water down the paint before you use it and maybe reduce some of the layer lines. This is also, it's not just a really hard test for this paint because I gave it a black primer. I mean, yes, that's a big negative to it, but also I'm just painting a huge, really flat surface where any kind of imperfections or lines or blemishes are really going to stand out, right? And that's not what I usually paint. I am painting textured surfaces of trolls and goblins and boars and all sorts of things. You know, I'll paint a lot of models and they're all very different, but none of them are massive plain surfaces like this. This is more an industrial sort of surface. So my point in that little spiel is that it's not a fair interpretation for the Monte Marte to say it has long streaky lines. Like, I don't, you know, not having a go at the Monte Marte paint. Yes, I do think it could be a little bit thinner, and it would, you know, be a slightly better paint for doing the color blocking. But when you weigh up the fact that it doesn't smell, it cleans up really, really easily, those are nice things to have, and then it's massively cheaper. Like, massively cheaper. Then all in all, yeah, I will be sticking with the Monte Marte for my color blocking. Long story short, very long rant short. Okay, so that's 2 coats, and I've got to say the Monte Marte does seem to have removed more of the black than the SMS product. You definitely can see more black residue left, but hey, as far as tests go, that has been a test of Monte Marte paint versus SMS paint, white versus white on a black primer. So yeah, something a little bit different than what I usually do here, but I will no doubtedly post some photos of the finished products all coloured up and with brushes in them in my Thingiverse profile. So these actual designs will be available for free, like all of these sort of paint holders and utility items and stuff. People in the community, we all contribute to the community by designing stuff and posting them on our profile. If you go to my webpage, down the bottom there's a link to my Thingiverse profile, and once these are all painted, I'll take photos of them, so within a few days they should be there available for anyone to download. So yeah, bit of a fun project, and looking forward. I'm going to sort out a little bit more organising of my paint desk, and that will be a nice thing too. So alright, thank you very much for watching.